Mini episode 1266 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
You basically can't throw a dead rat right now without hitting somebody in a media or governmental place that's been irresponsible at some point during this thing. There is enough, blame to go around. It's an interesting what-if type scenario here if you're looking at this. Like, I think all of us in a lot of different places were seething at the whole natural selection thing here of all the jerk-offs going to Sturgis this year. Now, the thing of it is that, I mean, if Obama had been president at the time, again, I think he might have been on flimsy legal ground to try to do anything on a federal level about that. So there are certain aspects of this that have been out of Trump's hands because we are 50 supposedly sovereign states. I don't see them as necessarily being that sovereign, but you have the freedom of motion of a lot of these governors. And could Trump go further in some cases than he has? Absolutely. But in some cases, if he went further, I'm not sure that would be constitutional. So some of what we've had of this, in fairness, has been because we are a country where one jerk-off in one small area can create problems that the rest of us have to deal with. That's called America.
Can you say with a straight face that if Donald Trump had come out from day one and said it is patriotic to wear a mask because we as Americans protect each other, do you think that Kristen Noem or whatever her name was would have allowed that?
Okay, now that's an interesting point.
If Obama had been president, Donald Trump and people like him would be stirring up the same people. To me, it is these things. I mean, those people, the Microsurgeons were there in part because they know Trump wanted them there.
Okay, now, all right.
Right?
Well, wait a minute. I refer you back to my previous statement where I said that the mask shaming is one of the primary reasons I'm voting third party. So I of all people, don't condone Trump doing that. I concede.
Yeah. I'm not saying
no.
I'm just saying that that's the mechanism.
But listen. I concede that you make an excellent point. That Kristi Noem, who is just basically being one of these, no pun intended, mouth breathers who is trying to pander to people on stuff, you have an excellent point on that. That if Trump had been responsible on masks, she would have fallen in line, and we wouldn't be having some of that. Now, that is, but, and this is where I guess I make the distinction, because I still hold up what I said previously about the limitation of Trump's powers. The limitation of Trump's powers as a statutory president, he is not. Listen, you accused him earlier of fascism. If he was, then there'd be a lot of these other things happening. But here's the thing. But with the bully pulpit, that's where I agree with you. The bully pulpit is where he could and should be doing more, not necessarily his statutory powers. Although the War Powers Act, that's something he's played footsie with all year and not pulled the trigger on. So that's something.
Well, the one that he can and should and could have used is the Defense Production Act.
I'm sorry, that not the War Powers Act. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
No, my God, I was just watching an article the other day. Watching a story the other day. As more people are going back to work, there's more need for the masks and everything, the personal protective equipment, and yet we're still lagging behind. You're like a competent, human society, given 6 months to organize things like this, does this. To me, it is a complete, what did he say back, April or May? Oh, no, I don't take any responsibility at all. That is the thing. He has completely abdicated. He wants to be a king with the trapping the king, his family ready to take over the reins of power, right beside him, creating a dynasty to last through the ages. I don't know how many years, but you might guess. It's disturbing. It's not American. And to just basically, talk about denying aid to states because their governors were mean to him.
Sure.
Well, first
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, this whiny wuss, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just such the gentle way to say it would be a weenie boy. You know, it's like he's the petty tyrant, the spoiled kid who never grew up. You know, and somehow he's supposed to be this paragon of manhood. At least George W. Bush, you know, looked good in a flight suit or whatever. You know, I just don't understand how a party that reveres masculinity fell for such like a facsimile of it. You know?
Well, listen, and I have a great many friends.
It doesn't remind me of Hitler. He reminds me of Mussolini. There is a difference.
Yeah. Well, you know, except Trump hasn't really made the trains run on time during the pandemic either. But, you know, I mean, yeah. I mean, look, and I have friends who have gone all the way over and are just, I have one, and I will not mention his name either because he'd probably kill me. A friend who warned me about the dangers of Trump in 2016, who the things coming out of his mouth these days in service of Donald Trump are not to be believed. So I fully understand all of what you're saying there. I will just say, though, writ large, as we're looking at this coming out of the 2 weeks here, my sense is, and I think the polls are showing this, so I'm going to say that I think in the general sense that the conventions are, I would say, probably fairly negligible as far as how it goes for the election, because I think it's almost impossible to say that the Republicans had a better week than the Democrats. To me, you could make the case for them coming out even, but I don't think you could make the case for better. And every poll out there is showing that this thing has gone from a blowout for Biden to a solid lead for Biden, but no longer a blowout. We're getting to the tightening season, and here's the thing, Colin. I'm going to tell you this, though. It is eerie how close it is to 4 years ago, of where I'm hearing from people like over the summer, okay? Nobody wanted to vote for Trump, whatever, but then at that time it was the threat of Hillary. And now I'm telling you, these riots and stuff, I have a friend, another one who I'm not good. I have a lot of friends that I don't want to name here because they would not want, these are sensitive times. You know, what you say can and will be held against you.
Absolutely.
Who was pretty gung-ho for Biden, who today said, God help me, I might be voting for Trump because he was just ranting about the whole Kenosha rioting and that this is taking over this whole thing. So we're at a point where I think it's a solid lead for Biden. My present projection would be probably a win somewhere along the lines of Obama in 08 or 2012. But the scenario where Trump gets close enough, and he's got to be inside of 5 points, this is the first time I believe there's a scenario, because if this rioting keeps going, if it can somehow surmount the coronavirus as concern number one, that's how Biden loses.
Okay, great points.
Thank you.
I will say first, it would help if police would stop shooting unarmed black people, right? That would really cut down on the level of protests and strife in the streets. Just if police would stop shooting unarmed black men, women too, that would slow things down. Second, listen, I am a political tactician, right? Rioting can be understandable, but it's rarely persuasive, especially when it goes on very long.
Yeah.
Right? One night of explosion can demonstrate passion. But when it goes on and on, it in the long term hurts the field.
Yeah.
You know, it hurts the cause. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the stuff that's gone on in D.C. in the last couple of days, I was in my neighborhood. You know, two friends of mine were, about a week ago, a crowd went by, and they were yelling at my friends to tip 25%. And my friend was like, oh, you want me to tip that little? Because they were going to tip 50%, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, those things are just silly. They don't convert anybody. So
right.
What folks did Rand Paul, look, it is very unlikely anybody was going to punch Rand Paul, right?
Well, wait a minute, and he sponsored the legislation, the Justice for Breonna Taylor Act or whatever it was. These illiterates, these drooling morons, didn't realize they were accosting the guy who sponsored the bill in the Senate to take up the cause they wanted. You can't get stupider
Well,
than they were.
I'd have to look at the bill. I mean,
dude, he's the sponsor. Take my word for it. He is the sponsor.
Yeah, but just because it has a good name doesn't mean it's a good bill. I have to look at it.
Okay, how many other Republicans are sponsoring bills, Colin?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to go look that up.
That would be zero.
Things I don't know about. But again, let me just say now, it was partway through what I was going to say about Rand Paul.
Okay.
What those protesters did was monumentally stupid, right? It was just monumentally stupid.
Yeah.
From an optics point of view, from a political tactical point of view, it's again what I was alluding to earlier, that there are people that just get a rush out of the action itself, and they are a danger, right? You know, they're the same kind of people who stick around after wars, you know, because they can't get enough of the rush.
Colin, there were some of these idiots chanting "Say her name" at, I repeat again, a guy who sponsored a Senate bill about the matter. They don't know public policy either, is what they don't know.
Well, again, forgive me if Democratic or liberal demonstrators, many of whom are probably far to the left of the Democratic Party, aren't going to take anything, even if they knew, they wouldn't take it seriously because it's Rand Paul. I mean,
but wait a minute. Rand Paul has a strong libertarian streak.
Rand is not the important part.
But Rand Paul is the most pro-Fourth Amendment guy in the Senate. If ever there's going to be anybody that's enough of a libertarian on there, he used to get under Obama's skin. Yeah. He used to get under Obama's skin for saying due process. So come on, I'm just saying, look at who you're going after. You're going after the due process guy, for God's sake.
Again, they had no, their ignorance, I think, is completely understandable, but I also don't think it's the point. The point is that what they were doing broadly to anybody who walked out that door that they yelled at was counterproductive, right?
Right.
And it's counterproductive because of the disinformation machine. You know, that is fodder for months of Fox News right there, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, Fox News is always going to, it really doesn't matter what a Democrat says, because Fox News will just take it out of context, like remember the legendary, "You didn't build this" line from Obama? What he was talking about is the business owner didn't build roads and the railroads. The guy, he didn't he didn't educate the workers who worked for him. He was getting to the point that businesses depend on public investment. And yet the Republicans and Fox News together clipped that and just turned it into Obama attacking business owners. Right? When your opposition is that intellectually dishonest, it is difficult to take, some of their legislation that seriously, right? Anyway, but I started off on the thing. You're giving these guys ammunition, but it doesn't matter in some way whether Democrats give them ammunition because they'll go invent it if they need it.
Well, and even allowing for the context of the words, which you're right about as far as what Obama was saying, I still felt like, and again, indicative of a general attitude of looking down your nose at small business owners and people in this country. I mean, I think, again, while
go listen to the speech.
It was again, but I'm
listen to the speech.
I'm looking. Well,
I'm also misquoted and taken out of context.
Well, I'm also looking at 8 years of a public policy record and other speeches that he's given. When I say that I felt like he was kind of looking down his nose, I'm somewhat conceding your point there, in that yes, it wasn't. It was snipped out of it, but I don't think. I don't think the context. Well, I don't think the context absolves him the way that you do. You feel it absolves him. I feel it paints a somewhat broader picture.
I didn't say anything absolved anybody.
Okay.
Whoa, what did I absolve people?
Absolve of being anti-business. I mean, that's
again. You're going to have to show me his anti-policies, and not something that a business coalition says is anti-business. The policies have other ends. You know what I mean? Like pollution.
You're not a big fan of NFIB white papers?
Yeah. Listen, they desperately wanted me to join. I mean, I'm a small business guy. They wanted me to join over the years, of course. I'm not giving those guys a dime. I'll join the NRA and go highway off the airplane. Oh, shoot. Where was I going to go with that? It was just... look, you can have policy disagreements with the Obamans, but just like with Joe Biden last night, Obama looked different enough that if you made him sound like a weirdo, it would help kick off some people on the edges. You know, Joe Biden's Uncle Joe, that kind of stuff's going to be a lot harder, especially when you stand up there and make him sound like Fidel Castro, right? I mean,
well,
that's just silly.
That's
it's
where,
just silly.
From a tactical point of view, it needs to be tool of those people rather than him himself, because him himself you can't sell.
You know, this is the guy who stood up there side by side with Barack Obama. He's a strong man. And you can tell when I say that you can see signs of cognitive decline. But what I see is times where he's trying to make a very complex point. And in the past, he would have had all these pieces of information right at hand to weave together. But what I see is him alluding to something that's very inside politics when, 10 years ago, he'd have been able to unpack it and make the point in real detail. But that's not, a sign of crashing downhill, like Ronald Reagan in 1988. You know what I mean? It's just nowhere in the same league.
I'll grant you this.
And Kamala Harris is no screaming lefty, for God's sake. The far left hates her.
Well, the one of my favorite follows on Twitter, Michael Malice. Again, because back during the primaries when he was doing a lot of signal boosting of my favorite candidate in the Democratic field, because I at least like her foreign policy, Tulsi Gabbard, Michael Malice. Straight
from Russia.
Yeah, well, again, if you believe all that crap. Michael Malice with the line of the year politically. I always heard that Hawaiians love to roast pigs.
That's supposed to be Obama? I mean, that's supposed to be Biden?
After what he did to Harris, remember, or she did. Remember what Tulsi did to Harris? Come on now.
Oh, I don't.
She ended her career in the primaries, basically. You don't remember Tulsi Gabbard dragging?
Her career ended because her campaign was in disarray.
No, she got exposed.
No, her campaign was not because Tulsi said. Jesus Christ, I'm a Democrat, remember?
Tulsi, yeah. How do you not remember Tulsi ending her on the spot? How do you not remember Tulsi leaving her as a gaping, smoking hole on the stage at the end of that thing there when she took her apart for her drug war hypocrisy?
The campaign failed because it was very poorly organized. Harris turned out to not be a great candidate, honestly. To me, this was one of these things where campaigns reveal things about people.
Yeah.
She hired her own sister to run her campaign.
Yeah.
So nobody could tell, nobody could get anything past the sister. And, two of them together were not good at making decisions quickly. Now, the Biden people basically got rid of all of her team and surrounded her with very experienced, people in the Democratic policy and political worlds, right?
Yeah.
So, to me, this is a training course in how to be president for her.
They say that preparation for debates a lot of times is just about being in the right zone, in the right mood. Having said that, any chance that Willie Brown is going to be part of her debate prep?
I have no earthly idea. Kamala and I don't talk near as much.
Okay.
So she's busy these days, yeah. But no, seriously, going back to the really big picture, I think you're right on about the sense of dislocation, right?
Yeah.
And very early on in 2017, I guess, I remember thinking that it would be Biden plus one of the Democratic women. I was originally thinking Gillibrand, and then somebody else was like, well, there are a lot of good women fellow too. So I'm like, oh, Harris, great, because she had just had one of the good hearings, right, where she was a very good questioner. So I, among many others, was thinking Biden-Harris was a logical mix. But Biden is just such a reassuring figure, and, the debates may be really critical. The debates are always pretty critical. I think it'll be really critical this year because Trump is trying to portray this insane, out-of-control Biden. And Biden's just going to stand up there and be Biden. He has done this hundreds of times, He is very good at this. And Trump's not going to be able to stalk him around the stage,
Yeah, but based on how Biden has done in what should be layup statements and layup media appearances that he's made over the last couple of months. Look, I agree with Crystal Ball, who always does a great job on The Rising, which is one of my favorite political watches these days, that the basement strategy's working. The more they can get away with that, the better from that perspective. I'm not as sanguine about his prospects in the debates. And here's the other thing too. Again, I don't see all the Trump partisans will talk about the parallels between now and 2016. I see very few of them because, again, he is an incumbent during a pandemic as opposed to a challenger. Having said that, though, the one similarity I see is this, is that, like I said, over the summer, in 2016, I didn't hardly know anybody that was going to vote for him. But this whole, that thing they talk about coming home, whatever, like that's been in American politics at least as far back as 68, when LBJ and that last minute pieces at hand, that kind of thing there, trying to bring the Democrats home, and he almost pulled it off for Humphrey. Trump was able to bring the Republicans home in the fall of 2016 because of fear of Hillary. And basically, what I see the similarity in this sense, that when the summer is about the general news cycle, and that's where he was just getting decimated by Hillary, and he got decimated worse by Biden with the way that this pandemic has gone. To me, the start of the conventions is everything between now and the election. It's all political season. It's all neener season with the debates. Trump is the king of neener. And in retrospect, he dominated from the point at which Hillary was way up. In retrospect, he dominated to come back to get to that point, even if we couldn't see it at the time. I mean, there was that weekend in October when it looked like his campaign was over after the Access Hollywood stuff, but that was all misdirection.
Access Hollywood, that is a great moment to bring up WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Right? Go back to 2016.
Yeah.
WikiLeaks, Roger Stone calls up WikiLeaks, and half an hour later they drop the bomb, right?
Yeah.
That was collusion with Russia, essentially. Anyone who says they know what's going to happen in November, it's insane. In 2016, I didn't say, yes, I think Trump is going to win, but I'm like, there is a damn good chance he could win. Brexit, for one thing, showed.
Yeah.
And the Brexit vote and the American 2016 vote were similar in that a lot of people, especially younger people, just didn't vote, right? The thing is, with Hillary, you've got literally a 30-year, going back to when she was, when Bill was running for governor for the first time, 30 years of conservative media sliming her. And, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to defend the Clintons, right? They did plenty of things to themselves. But she in particular was just demonized in a way that I don't think a man would have been, frankly. Biden...
Barack Obama says hi.
Well, yeah, but again, it was in a different way. And remember, Obama won by 8 points. She only won by 2 points. So the popular vote slipped by 6 points. But I, for one, am working. Democrats are not going to repeat the mistakes of 2016. I think one thing you should always keep in mind is the margin in the national vote to the House of Representatives in 2018. Traditionally, Republicans tend to do better in off-year elections. Their voters are older. They tend to vote more frequently or more regularly. Dems won by, I believe, around 8 points.
Also, though, midterms are bad for incumbents, though, so that was part of it.
Well, absolutely. Although, we can go into that another time. But again, it's just looking at the voter patterns, there were a lot of shifts away.
Oh, it was worse than usual. It was worse than usual for an incumbent, but I'm just saying incumbents, that they're always doing bad in midterms by and large.
Yeah, and you're blamed. Yeah, exactly. That's why Democrats are planning for 2022.
Yeah.
But a bunch of us, like I'm doing work aimed at some very specific state legislative districts in a few states. I'm working with an organization that works with celebrities who are from these rural areas. And they make video content, and we'll get it out on Facebook and get it out to their communities, right? And it's for progressive issues. So you're trying to stimulate issue-based voting. Although also in a place like rural America, I'm from East Texas, a liberal idea you're never going to encounter in the wild in its natural state. You're only going to encounter it in a very mutated state. So I'm happy that we're going to have some progressive messaging in these communities. But multiply that by thousands. The campaign is on the ground in 17 states, the Biden campaign. They aren't really going door to door yet, but they're doing plenty of phone calls They're doing lots of online outreach, and you're going to have literally hundreds of get out the vote organizations targeting particular regions or communities or ethnic groups, languages, whatever, to try to mobilize people and get them out. Obviously labor unions. Where in 2016, the campaign kept on its hands. They didn't even run polls the last month. They just relied on their own analytics, and they missed what was going on. And then the Comey letter. And then Hillary's own missteps and stupidities here and there, right? Like, so many things had to go right. To me, if the Democrats don't get the Senate, it's entirely meaningless because Mitch McConnell is not going to allow a Democratic president to do anything, right? Democrats have to win the Senate if they want to get anything done. So that's what's on the line to me.
Well, that is the way that the Senate could go is definitely very important in all of this, no question about it. Something that I want to mention here before we come all the way around.
I do need a head in a bit.
Yeah, well, I will. All right, I will bring it around on this note, and just to ask you toward the end here, because just somebody that I want to mention with some respect toward the end of the program, I may have been perhaps in fact, everybody perhaps to it. I would say the unlikeliest, maybe fan is too strong of a word, but enthusiast, somebody who was amused by the Michael Brooks show and was very saddened by his passing this summer here. I don't know if in your particular side of the leftosphere, Colin, if you had much opportunity to take in the guy's show, but somebody very talented, very funny.
I don't know radio.
Okay, well, this is in podcasting. It is a spin-off of, ironically, a show that I don't have a lot of use for, The Majority Report. It was a spin-off of that, and a thing where, let me tell you how funny this guy was. I heard an impression that he did. He was doing what I considered to be an extremely unfair, demagogic, imitation of Rand Paul, and yet so spot on with the voice, so funny. I'm sitting there, I'm wearing a Rand Paul t-shirt at the time, and I'm laughing my balls off, like, damn you, Michael Brooks, but that's funny. So that's talent, man. That's talent. When you could make somebody.
It amazes me that you guys know that much how Rand Paul sounds.
I mean, it was a thing where, and I'm totally incapable of doing the voice, but the impression was something along the lines of, I came to Washington, D.C. to fulfill my one true dream, which is to make sure that poor people never have health care. I mean, the voice was so spot, like, how could I not laugh, right? The voice was so spot on. I'm going, man, there's a couple of Rand Paul Facebook groups I could get expelled for laughing at this, but I don't care. It's funny. So, rest in peace, Michael Brooks, a great talent, somebody who I don't agree with at all politically, but one of the great ones out there in the podcasting world. So, again, we'll see what happens here. I think you and I both see this at this point as Biden being a relatively solid favorite at the moment, but not an unblowable race at this point by any stretch of the imagination. I almost thought it was,
Democratic activists have learned that no race is ever unblowable.
Well, exactly. But, and Biden through the course of his career, who had never even done well in Democratic primaries, had been abysmal failures in both 1988 and 2008, and really the first part of 2020 until this miracle coalescing behind him. Again, not exactly Mr. Impregnable, but all it takes is being at the right place in the right time, and when you're running against Trump in a pandemic, that might be all it takes. So
I think so much of it ultimately is going to go down to, do people feel like they can take 4 more years of this?
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, who might otherwise be on the fence, it's just this exhaustion. Please don't do this to me anymore. It's like we've been tapped with a cattle prod too many times,
Yeah. Well, that's where Trump is
up. We'll see, but it's definitely not unblowable.
No, it is not unblowable, and hopefully we can get a chance to get another one in here with you not long before the election and see where things stand and see what our thoughts are on that. But
just remember, election day is a process now.
It is.
So even by the 3rd debate, a lot of ballots will have been cast.
Exactly, and as they say in the city of Chicago, vote early, vote often. So, we'll have to see how this breaks in. How many extra votes get harvested along the way? You know, that's always an interesting thing.
I think if anyone tries to pull that off, they'll get found out pretty darn quick.
You have more faith in the process than I do, Colin, but you know.
I have faith in the number of people who are watching the process on all sides, you know?
To me, a lot of them are on the take as well, but we'll see how this all...
Well, if they are, sign me up, man. I want to be on the take something.
You just got to find the right big city, Colin. They're all crooked. So go to the closest one around, and you shouldn't have any trouble finding a spot there.
I want to thank you very much.
Yes, there you go. There you go. Well, you know, from your base in the big city here, thank you so much for being a part of this again. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this mini episode of the FDH Lounge.